The moment I realized my family had already decided who mattered and who didn't, I was standing in my parents' kitchen holding a grocery bag that cut into my fingers because I had packed it too full. Milk, bread, their favorite coffee, the kind with the blue label my mother insisted tasted cleaner. I had driven 40 minutes after work to bring it to them like I did twice a week. I still had my coat on. I hadn't even sat down yet. My name is Evelyn Carter. I was 33 years old then. Old enough to know when kindness had turned into expectation. Old enough to recognize the silence that comes right before someone tells you a truth they've rehearsed without you. My father cleared his throat. "Evelyn," he said carefully, the way people speak when they're about to disappoint you but want credit for being gentle. My mother stood by the sink drying the same plate over and over. My younger sister, Lauren, leaned against the counter, scrolling on her phone, smiling at something that had nothing to do with me. "We've been talking," my father continued, "about the future." I nodded, setting the grocery bag down. My fingers throbbed. I didn't notice until later that I never offered to put the groceries away. The house, my mother said, still not looking at me. And everything attached to it. The savings. The land your grandmother left. She paused. That pause rearranged my entire life. "It's going to Lauren." The words didn't come with anger, or apology, or even hesitation. They came with certainty. The kind that tells you the conversation ended before you entered the room. I waited. I honestly thought there would be more. Some explanation that would make it sting less. Some acknowledgement of the years I had rearranged myself around this family. Instead, my sister finally looked up. "Well," she said lightly, "it just makes sense." "Makes sense." I felt the floor tilt just slightly, enough to make me grab the back of a chair. "I don't understand," I said. My voice sounded strange to me, like it belonged to someone else. My father sighed. "You're strong, Evelyn. You always land on your feet. Lauren needs stability." Lauren smiled. "And I'm starting a family." That was when it clicked. This wasn't about need. It was about narrative. Lauren was the one that they worried about. The one they protected. The one whose mistakes were phases and whose dreams were potential. I was the solution. The buffer. The one who filled gaps without being seen. For over a decade, I had been quietly paying parts of their lives forward. I covered medical deductibles. I handled paperwork. I took unpaid time off work when my father's back went out. I sent money without announcing it. I thought love meant doing things without keeping score. But score had been kept, just not by me. "I helped pay the property taxes," I said softly, "for years." My mother flinched but didn't turn around. "We appreciate that," she said. "But this isn't about money." "It never is, not when people are using you." "And the trust Grandma left?" I asked. "She wanted it split." My father's jaw tightened. "We're the trustees. This is our decision." That sentence landed harder than the rest, not because it was loud, because it was final. I looked at my sister. She wouldn't meet my eyes now. Her fingers twisted the ring on her hand. Not nervous, possessive. "So that's it," I said. No one answered. I stood there for a long moment, waiting for something inside me to break. Tears, anger, pleading. None of it came. Instead, something colder settled in my chest, something quiet. "Okay," I said. All three of them looked relieved. That was when I understood how long they had been waiting for me to say that. I picked up my purse. My mother finally turned, opening her mouth as if to say something kind, something too late. "I'll let you get back to your evening," I said. "Dinner's in the fridge. Heat it for 3 minutes." I walked out before they could thank me. In my car, I sat with my hands on the steering wheel, staring at the darkened windshield. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to hold anyone together. 2 days later, a letter arrived at my apartment. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to my parents, forwarded by mistake. Inside was a copy of a loan agreement from a local bank. The collateral listed made my stomach drop. The house. Their house. The one they had just given away. And the signature at the bottom wasn't my father's. It was my sister's. That was the moment the story stopped being about inheritance and became about betrayal. I read the loan agreement 3 times before the meaning settled into my bones. Not skimmed. Read. Slowly. Like each sentence might rearrange itself into something less threatening if I gave it enough patience. It didn't. The document was dated 6 months earlier. The lender was a regional bank 2 towns over. The amount was large enough to make my throat tighten, but what mattered more was the line beneath it. Collateral residential property located at my parents' address. The house I had helped keep standing when the roof leaked. The house I had paid taxes on when my parents fell behind. The house they had just calmly informed me would never be mine. I sat on the edge of my couch, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. My name wasn't on it. I wasn't a guarantor. I wasn't even mentioned. I had been erased twice. Once emotionally, now legally. Lauren's signature sat at the bottom of the page, neat and confident. She had always had beautiful handwriting. Teachers praised it when we were kids. My parents framed her certificates. Mine went into drawers. There was a second signature below hers, my father's. But something about it looked wrong. Not forged, just rushed. The line uneven, the curve unfamiliar, like a man signing something he didn't fully understand because someone he loved told him it was necessary. I felt sick. I called my parents. My mother answered on the fourth ring, Evelyn. Her voice already carried fatigue, or guilt, or both. I need you to tell me something, I said. I kept my voice level, calm, careful. Did you know the house was used as collateral for a loan? Silence. Then my father's voice in the background. Who is it? It's Evelyn, my mother said. Another pause, longer. My father came on the line. Where did you hear that? I closed my eyes. So it's true. We didn't think it was a big deal, he said quickly. Lauren said it was temporary, just until her business got off the ground. Her business? I let out a slow breath. What business? He hesitated. The one she's starting. I almost laughed. Almost. Lauren had started 3 businesses in the last 5 years. All of them lasted less than a season. Candle making, online coaching, a boutique that never opened, each one funded quietly by my parents, each one forgiven. She said it was low risk, my father continued. The bank wouldn't approve her otherwise. And you signed without reading, I asked. I trusted her, he snapped. Then softer. She's my daughter. So was I. I didn't say it. When is the first payment due, I asked. Another pause. Last month, he admitted. My stomach dropped. And did it get paid? No answer. I hung up without saying goodbye. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while memories replayed themselves with cruel clarity. Every time I had stepped in, every time I had told myself it was temporary, every time I had believed that love meant endurance. By morning I was done believing. I took the day off work and drove to the bank listed on the agreement. The building smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. The woman at the front desk smiled politely and asked how she could help. I have questions about a loan tied to this address, I said, sliding the paper across the counter. Her smile faded slightly. Are you an account holder? No, I said, but I have reason to believe fraud may be involved. That word does things to people. She disappeared into the back. 10 minutes later, a man in a navy suit ushered me into a small office. He spoke in rehearsed tones, careful not to confirm or deny too much. What he did say was enough. The loan was delinquent. Notices had been sent. The grace period was ending. If payments weren't brought, current foreclosure proceedings would begin. I drove home shaking. When I pulled into my apartment complex, my phone buzzed. A message from Lauren. Why are you talking to Mom and Dad about the loan? So she knew. You used the house as collateral, I typed back. Without telling me. Without paying. Her reply came fast. You don't live there. It's not your problem. That was when something inside me finally snapped into focus. This wasn't ignorance. It was entitlement. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and began pulling records. Property tax receipts, bank transfers, emails, texts, everything I had ever sent to help my parents. I hadn't kept score, but I had kept proof. By midnight, my dining table was covered in paper. Years of quiet support mapped out in black and white. The amounts looked different written out, larger, heavier, more real. I realized something then. Lauren had built her life on the assumption that someone would always clean up after her. And that someone had always been me. The next morning I made an appointment with an attorney. Her office was small, practical, no inspirational quotes on the wall. She listened without interrupting, flipping through my documents with increasing focus. You were excluded from the estate, she said slowly. But you have financial entanglement, contribution, and potential undue influence. What does that mean? I asked. It means, she said, meeting my eyes, that your sister may have overplayed her hand. For the first time since that night in my parents' kitchen, I felt something like control return to my body. Not revenge. Leverage. As I left the office, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Lauren. You need to stop digging. You're going to ruin everything. I stared at the screen. No, she had already done that. All I was doing now was turning on the light. And once the truth is visible, it doesn't go back into hiding quietly. It fights. And I was ready. The attorney's name was Margaret Hale. She was in her late 50s, wore her hair pulled back tight, and spoke in sentences that didn't waste words on comfort. I liked her immediately. This is not about revenge, she said, tapping the loan agreement with a pen. This is about exposure. She slid a yellow legal pad toward me. On it, she had written 3 words. Pattern, pressure, proof. Your sister didn't just take a loan, Margaret continued. She created a pattern of dependency, applied pressure at the right moment, and assumed no one would question her, especially not you. I swallowed. What can I do? Margaret leaned back. First, you stop protecting everyone else. Second, you document everything. Third, you let people face the consequences of their own choices. That last sentence felt like blasphemy. I had built my entire adult life around preventing consequences. Over the next 2 weeks, I became someone my family didn't recognize. I stopped answering calls immediately. I stopped sending money. I stopped smoothing things over. And the silence that followed was revealing. My mother left increasingly frantic voicemails. Not apologetic, anxious. Evelyn, your father's blood pressure is high again. Lauren is under so much stress right now. You don't understand how hard this is for us. Not once did she ask how I was. Lauren, on the other hand, switched tactics. She showed up at my apartment unannounced one evening, standing in the hallway with tears already formed like she'd practiced the look in the mirror. You're doing this on purpose, she said the moment I opened the door. Doing what I asked. Making Mom cry, making Dad sick. You've always resented me. I leaned against the doorframe, strangely calm. That's not true, she scoffed. Please, you've always thought you were better than me. No, I said quietly. I thought I was responsible for you. Her face hardened. That's the same thing. It wasn't. But explaining that would have taken years, and I was done teaching lessons no one wanted to learn. You need to fix this, she said. Talk to the bank. Convince them to give us more time. Us. Why would I do that, I asked. Her eyes flashed. Because we're family. I almost laughed. Family doesn't hide foreclosure notices, I said. Family doesn't sign away a house and pretend it doesn't affect everyone. Her voice dropped. You think you're so smart. You think you finally got leverage, but you don't know what you're messing with. I met her stare. Neither did you. She left without another word. That night, Margaret called. They filed for a loan modification, she said. Your parents, with your sister as representative. My stomach twisted. Can she do that? Only if they allow it, Margaret replied, which tells me something important. What? They're still choosing her. That realization hurt more than I expected. Not because I needed their approval, but because it confirmed what I had refused to accept. I had been valuable to them only as long as I was useful and invisible. Margaret advised patience. People reveal themselves when pressure is applied, she said. Let them talk. Let them act. They did. Lauren posted online constantly. Motivational quotes, photos of coffee meetings, hashtags about building dreams and female founders. Anyone looking from the outside would think she was thriving. But I noticed something else. Her likes were dropping. Comments were turning vague. And then one afternoon, I received a message from someone I didn't know. I think your sister owes me money. The message came from a woman named Diane. She said she had invested in Lauren's business. 5 figures, no returns, no updates, no answers. I saw her post today, Diane wrote. That's how I found you. That was the moment I understood. Lauren hadn't just used our parents' house. She had used everyone. I forwarded the message to Margaret. She replied with a single sentence. This just became much bigger. Within days, more messages arrived, small amounts, large ones, stories that sounded uncomfortably familiar, promises made, deadlines missed, blame shifted. I wasn't hunting. The truth was coming to me. Margaret began coordinating quietly, not publicly, not emotionally, strategically. This is where people make mistakes, she warned. They want justice to be loud. Justice works best when it's patient. Meanwhile, my parents stopped calling. Complete silence. That scared me more than the arguments. I drove by the house one evening. Lights off, curtains drawn. The place looked smaller than I remembered, fragile. I sat in my car and realized something that made my chest ache. If the house was lost, they would blame me. Not Lauren. Me, because I was the one who stopped fixing things. That night I made a decision. I would no longer accept the role they had assigned me. Not the fixer. Not the villain. Not the sacrifice. I would be the witness. And witnesses don't rewrite the story. They let it speak for itself. The next morning, Margaret called again. The bank scheduled a final notice, she said. And your sister made a move. What kind of move, I asked. She transferred assets, quietly, which tells me she knows what's coming. My pulse quickened, and I asked. And that means Margaret said it's time to stop being quiet. I looked out my window at the city waking up, cars moving, people heading to lives that weren't on the verge of collapse. For the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt ready. Because once someone starts running, they're no longer in control. And Lauren was running. The first foreclosure notice arrived on a Thursday. Not to my parents' house, to my apartment. Margaret had warned me it might happen. Sometimes banks reach out to the person they suspect actually understands the numbers, she'd said. They fish where the truth swims. The envelope was thin, official, the kind that doesn't look dangerous until you open it. I sat at my kitchen table, the same place where I'd once planned vacations I never took, and read the notice slowly. The language was polite, almost apologetic, but the meaning was blunt. If the delinquent amount was not paid within the next 30 days, proceedings would continue. 30 days. Written out like that, it felt shorter than it sounded. I called my parents immediately. My mother answered, her voice brittle. "Evelyn, we're handling it." "You're not," I said. "The bank just sent me the notice." A sharp inhale. "Why would they contact you?" "Because I've been the one paying your bills for years," I said. "Because I understand what's happening, and because Lauren hasn't paid a cent." "She's trying," my mother said weakly. I closed my eyes. Trying is not the same as paying. My father came on the line. "What do you want us to do?" he asked, tired. Not angry, just exhausted. I felt something shift. For the first time, he wasn't defending Lauren. He was asking me. "I want you to stop pretending this will fix itself," I said. "And I want you to stop letting Lauren speak for you." Silence. Then my mother said quietly, "She said if we didn't support her, she'd lose everything." "So will you," I replied. They didn't answer. That afternoon, Margaret called me into her office. "She's panicking," she said, sliding a file across the desk. "Asset transfers, closed accounts. She's trying to make herself look insolvent." "Is that legal?" I asked. Margaret's mouth curved slightly. "Not if the intent is to evade creditors." My stomach tightened. "So what happens now?" "Now," she said, "we document, and we wait for her to make a mistake." Lauren made it 3 days. She called me that Sunday night drunk. I could hear it immediately. The looseness in her voice, the false warmth. "Evelyn," she said, drawing my name out, "I just want to talk." I didn't respond. "You always were so serious," she continued. "Always thought you were better than me because you worked harder." "That's not true," I said. She laughed. "You think sacrifice makes you special." I gripped the phone. "I think accountability does." Her tone shifted. "You don't understand how much pressure I'm under." "You put yourself there," I said. "No," she snapped. "You did. You stopped helping. You stopped fixing things." There it was, the truth slipping out between drinks. "You built your life assuming I'd clean up after you," I said calmly. "That's not my responsibility." She went quiet for a moment. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "If the house goes, Mom will never forgive you." I exhaled slowly. "She doesn't forgive me now." Lauren scoffed. "You really think you're the hero here?" "No," I said. "I think I'm finally honest." She hung up. The next morning, Margaret forwarded me an email. One of Lauren's investors had filed a formal complaint. Another followed by noon. By the end of the week, there were 5. Different people, same story. Lauren had promised returns. She had missed deadlines. She had gone silent. Margaret filed a motion to include these complaints in the broader case. "This isn't just family drama anymore," she told me. "This is a pattern of financial misconduct." The word misconduct echoed in my head. I drove past my parents' house again that evening. This time the lights were on. My mother sat at the table alone, staring at papers spread out in front of her. I knocked. She looked startled when she opened the door, then wary. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I know," I replied, "but you need to hear this from me." She stepped aside reluctantly. The kitchen smelled like cold coffee and fear. "They're coming after Lauren," I said gently. "The investors, the bank, possibly more." My mother sank into a chair. "She didn't mean to hurt anyone." "I know," I said, and I did, but intent doesn't erase damage. "She said you're doing this to punish her." I met my mother's eyes. "I'm doing this to stop it." Tears welled up. "I don't recognize my family anymore." Neither did I. "But I recognize the pattern now, and patterns don't lie." "I love you," I said, "but I won't lie for her, and I won't save her from herself." My mother nodded slowly, like someone accepting a diagnosis they'd been avoiding. That night, Margaret called again. "She tried to move money overseas," she said. "Badly." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. So I asked, "So the bank froze the accounts?" For the first time since this began, I smiled. Not because Lauren was falling, but because the truth was finally faster than her lies. And once that happens, there's no outrunning it. The day the accounts were frozen, my parents didn't call me. They didn't call Lauren either. They sat in their house, surrounded by papers they didn't fully understand. And for the first time in decades, there was no one rushing in to smooth the edges for them. That silence did what arguments never could. It forced them to see. I found out later that my mother spent that entire afternoon at the dining table, the same one where they had told me I would receive nothing. She spread out the bank statements, the notices, the letters from investors she had never heard of. Each envelope carried a truth she hadn't wanted to face. Lauren arrived just after sunset. She didn't knock. She slammed the door open and threw her purse onto the counter like a weapon. "What did you do?" she demanded. My mother looked up slowly. "What did you do?" The question stopped Lauren cold. I wasn't there, but I know exactly how it went. My mother told me later, her voice hollow, like someone describing a storm after the roof is already gone. Lauren started crying, loud, messy, accusatory. She said the bank was overreacting. She said investors were impatient. She said this was all temporary. My father asked to see the numbers. Lauren refused. That was the moment everything cracked. Because when you build your power on charm, transparency is your enemy. My father stood up. His hands were shaking, not with anger, with disappointment. You told us this was safe, he said. Lauren snapped back. It would have been if Evelyn hadn't interfered. My mother's voice cut through the room. Do not blame your sister. Lauren froze. I trusted you, my mother continued. I signed things because you told me to. I defended you because I thought you were trying. But now strangers are calling this house looking for money. Lauren laughed sharp and bitter. So what you're choosing her now? That sentence landed heavier than any accusation. My mother didn't answer right away. And in that pause, Lauren saw the truth. The ground was shifting beneath her. She stormed out before either of them could respond, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. The glass cracked across a photo of the four of us taken years ago when smiling still felt honest. I was at home when my phone rang. It was my father. Can we come see you, he asked. That was new. They arrived an hour later looking older than they had a week ago. My mother clutched her purse like it was the only thing holding her upright. My father kept rubbing his hands together as if trying to warm them. We sat in my living room in awkward silence. Finally, my mother spoke. She lied to us. I nodded. I know. We wanted to believe her, she said, tears slipping down her cheeks. We didn't want to admit we raised someone who could do this. I chose my words carefully. You didn't cause her choices. But we enabled them, my father said quietly. Yes. He looked at me, then really looked at me as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. You were always there, he said. We just assumed you always would be. Something in my chest tightened. That assumption nearly cost you everything, I replied. They didn't argue. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was desperate. Help us, she whispered. There it was. The request I had been waiting for. The one that would have once pulled me back into the same role without question. I took a breath. I will help you, I said slowly. But not the way I used to. They both nodded. You listen to the attorney, I continued. You stop letting Lauren speak for you, and you tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. My father swallowed. And Lauren, I didn't answer right away. You don't protect her from consequences, I said finally. Not anymore. That night, Margaret filed additional paperwork. With my parents' consent, she formally challenged the loan citing misrepresentation and undue influence. It wasn't a guarantee, but it slowed the process. Bought time. Lauren reacted exactly as expected. She showed up at my apartment again 2 days later. This time she didn't cry. She smiled. You think you've won, she said. I think this isn't a game, I replied. Her smile sharpened. If I go down, I'm not going alone. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. What does that mean? She leaned closer. You've been helping Mom and Dad financially for years. You think the bank won't look at you? You think investors won't wonder where all that money came from? I held her gaze. I have records. So do I, she said. That was the first time I truly felt afraid. Because Lauren wasn't just desperate anymore. She was cornered. And cornered people don't play fair. That night, Margaret called me with urgency in her voice. She's threatening counterclaims, she said. Baseless but damaging. She's trying to muddy the waters. I closed my eyes. What do? We prepare, Margaret said. Because the next phase isn't about money. It's about reputation. I looked around my apartment, my quiet life, my steady job, the things I had built carefully, honestly. Lauren was willing to burn everything if it meant she didn't have to stand alone in the ashes. And I realized something then with absolute clarity. This wasn't just about saving a house. It was about finally stepping out of a story where I was only valuable as long as I stayed silent. And I was done being silent. The first rumor reached my workplace before the official letter did. I was pouring coffee in the break room when a colleague I barely knew paused beside me, hesitating just long enough to make the moment uncomfortable. Hey, she said, lowering her voice. I heard something weird. About your family. My hand tightened around the mug. What did you hear? She shifted her weight. That your sister's business is under investigation. And that you're involved. There it was. Lauren had done exactly what Margaret predicted. She couldn't stop the truth, so she bent it, twisted it, released just enough poison into the air to make people suspicious. By noon, my manager asked to speak with me privately. He wasn't accusatory, just careful. I want you to know, he said, fingers folded on the desk, this doesn't affect your standing here, but if there's anything we should be aware of... I've done nothing wrong, I said evenly. He nodded. That's what I thought. Still people talk. People always do. That afternoon, Margaret called. She contacted one of your former employers, she said. Told them you were manipulating your parents financially. My chest tightened. Can she do that? She can say whatever she wants, Margaret replied. Truth is a different matter. But it still spreads, I said. Yes, Margaret agreed, which is why we stop reacting and start documenting. By the end of the week, Lauren had escalated. She sent emails to extended family members, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, an aunt who loved drama more than facts. The message was always the same. Evelyn turned on us. Evelyn wants everything. Evelyn is trying to control Mom and Dad. My mother called me in tears one evening. She says you're ruining her life, she said. I closed my eyes. She ruined her own life. But everyone thinks. I don't care what everyone thinks, I interrupted gently. I care about what's true. There was a long silence. Then my mother said something I hadn't expected. I don't think we ever taught her that word. True. That weekend, Margaret arranged a formal meeting with the bank's legal team. My parents attended. Lauren did not. She sent her lawyer instead, a young man with polished shoes and tired eyes. He argued that Lauren had authority, that the risk was disclosed, that my parents had consented. Margaret slid the evidence across the table without raising her voice. Medical records, email chains, payment histories, witness statements from investors. One of the bank's attorneys adjusted his glasses. This changes things, he said. Lauren's lawyer swallowed. For the first time, the narrative wasn't in Lauren's hands. Outside the building, my father leaned against the wall, pale. She knew what she was doing, he said. Yes, I replied. He looked at me. Why didn't we see it? Because seeing it would have required admitting you were wrong. That night, Lauren showed up at my parents' house again. This time, my father didn't let her in. She screamed on the porch, accused, threatened, cried. Neighbors watched from behind curtains. The family story was no longer private. The next morning, a certified letter arrived at my apartment. Lauren was formally disputing my involvement, claiming coercion, claiming financial abuse. I read it twice, then forwarded it to Margaret. She's desperate, Margaret said, and she's running out of moves. Desperate people get dangerous, I said. Yes, Margaret agreed, which is why we're going public. I stared at my phone. Public how? Controlled disclosure, she said. One statement, one narrative, the truth without emotion. A week later, the local paper ran a small article. Not sensational, not cruel, just factual. Business loan under review. Family property protected pending investigation. Multiple investors cooperating. Lauren's name appeared only once. Mine didn't appear at all. But everyone knew. My inbox filled with messages. Some supportive, some cruel, some confused. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on what mattered. My parents started attending counseling, together, separately. My father apologized one evening quietly over dinner. We leaned on you because you were strong, he said, and we punished you for it. I nodded. I know. I don't expect forgiveness, he added. That's good, I replied, because forgiveness isn't the goal. What is, my mother asked? Change, I said. The real turning point came 2 days later. Margaret called, her voice measured but unmistakably satisfied. The district attorney is reviewing Lauren's case, she said. Fraud, misrepresentation, potential criminal charges. My heart raced. Jail? Possibly, she said. If it goes that far. I didn't feel relief. I felt grief. Because no matter how deserved, consequences don't erase history. That night, Lauren called me from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Almost. You're enjoying this, she said without greeting. No, I replied. I'm surviving it. She laughed, brittle and hollow. You always wanted to be the good one. I wanted to be honest, I said. You think Mom and Dad love you more now? That's not what this is about. Her voice dropped. If I fall, you'll be alone. I thought about that. About the years I had already been alone while surrounded by family. I already was, I said quietly. She hung up. And in that silence, I understood something profound. The truth doesn't shout. It waits. And when it finally stands up, it doesn't need to push anyone down. People fall on their own. The day the district attorney formally filed charges, I was sitting in traffic watching the light change from red to green without moving. My phone buzzed once, then again. Margaret's name lit up the screen. It's official, she said. They're charging her. I didn't ask who. There was no one else it could be. What kind of charges, I asked, though my voice already knew the answer. Financial fraud, misrepresentation, attempted concealment of assets. They're also reviewing coercion related to your parents' signatures. The words landed with a dull finality. Not explosive, not cinematic, just heavy. Is she being arrested? I asked. Not today, Margaret said. She'll be summoned first. But Evelyn, this is no longer something we can contain privately. I pulled my car to the side of the road and turned off the engine. My hands were shaking. I understand, I said. After I hung up, I sat there longer than necessary, letting the truth settle into my body. This was the point of no return, not for Lauren, for all of us, for all. That evening, my parents asked me to come over. The house felt different when I walked in, quieter, smaller, as if the walls themselves were tired of holding secrets. My mother had laid out paperwork on the dining table, bank statements, legal notices, copies of emails Lauren had sent them over the years. "I keep rereading these," she said, her voice unsteady, trying to figure out when it went wrong. My father sat beside her, staring at his hands. "It didn't go wrong all at once," I said. "It happened in pieces. Little permissions, little excuses." My mother looked up at me. "And you paid the price." I didn't deny it. That night, something shifted between us. Not healed, not resolved, but honest. The next morning, Lauren was everywhere. Her face appeared on local news segments. Not as a villain, not yet. As a woman responding to allegations. As a business owner maintaining her innocence. She released a statement through her lawyer, emotionally charged, carefully vague. She claimed betrayal, misunderstanding, family conflict turned public spectacle. She never denied the money. She just explained why she felt entitled to it. My phone filled with messages, some from people I hadn't heard from in years, some from strangers. "You did the right thing. How could you turn on your sister? Family business should stay private." I deleted most of them. One message, however, stopped me. It was from a woman named Helen, one of Lauren's early investors. "I just wanted you to know," she wrote, "that if you hadn't spoken up, I would have lost everything. Thank you." I sat with that message for a long time, because this was the part no one warned you about. Doing the right thing doesn't feel heroic. It feels isolating. Lauren's summons arrived 3 days later. She came to my parents' house that night. Not screaming, not crying. Quiet. She stood in the doorway, eyes rimmed, red face stripped of its usual confidence. "I need to talk to Evelyn," she said. My father hesitated, then stepped aside. We stood in the living room alone. The same room where we'd opened Christmas presents as kids, where I'd slept on the couch after late nights working on their bills. "You didn't have to go this far," she said. "You went that far," I replied. "I just stopped covering it up." She shook her head. "You don't understand. I never meant for it to spiral." "I believe you," I said. "But intent doesn't erase impact." Her voice cracked. "They're going to destroy me." "No," I said quietly. "They're going to hold you accountable." She looked at me, then really looked at me. Not as competition, not as a threat, as someone she had underestimated for too long. "You always were stronger than me," she said. "That's not true," I replied. "I was just willing to face consequences." She laughed bitterly. "You think this ends with me?" I met her gaze. "I think this ends with truth." She left without another word. The court date was set for early winter. My parents attended every session, together, silent, aging visibly with each appearance. Lauren sat with her lawyer, composed but brittle. Her image had fractured. The charm no longer worked. Witnesses testified, investors spoke, bank representatives laid out timelines. Margaret presented the evidence calmly, methodically. And then my parents were called to the stand. That was the hardest part. My mother's voice shook as she admitted she hadn't understood what she was signing. My father's hands trembled as he described the pressure, the fear of disappointing Lauren. Neither of them looked at her while they spoke. When it was over, Lauren stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. The judge ordered a recess. Outside the courtroom, my mother collapsed into my arms. "I failed both of you," she whispered. I held her. "You failed to stop it, but you're stopping it now." When the judge returned, his tone was firm. The case would proceed to trial. Lauren's bail conditions were revised, her assets restricted, travel limited. As we left the courtroom, reporters shouted questions. I kept my head down. Lauren didn't. She turned to the cameras. "This isn't over," she said. She was right, but not in the way she thought. That night alone in my apartment, I replayed the last year in my mind. The kitchen, the loan agreement, the first lie I stopped accepting. And I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. Because when the truth has been spoken out loud, anger loses its purpose. What remains is choice, and I had already made mine. Winter arrived early that year, the kind of cold that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. By the time the trial began, the trees outside the courthouse were bare, their branches sharp against the gray sky, like they had been stripped down to the truth. I sat in the second row, hands folded in my lap, listening to the shuffle of papers and the low murmur of voices. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and burnt coffee. Every sound felt amplified. Every breath mattered. Lauren entered with her attorney, her posture straight, her face carefully neutral. She wore a dark blazer, conservative, deliberate, the version of herself she wanted the judge to see. My parents came in together slower now, older somehow. My mother's hand rested on my father's arm, not for support, but for grounding. They took their seats without looking at Lauren. When the judge called the case, the room stilled. The prosecutor began with facts, not emotion. Dates, amounts, signed documents, each one read aloud like a small hammer striking stone. The loan, the missed payments, the investor funds, the transfers made after notices were issued. Lauren's attorney objected often, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, but the shape of the story was already clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern. Witnesses followed, one by one. An investor described the promises Lauren made, her confidence, her assurances that everything was secured. Another spoke about emails that went unanswered once money changed hands. A third admitted he had felt foolish for trusting her, embarrassed to speak up sooner. Each testimony added weight. Then the bank representative took the stand. He explained the collateral, the risk assessment, the signatures. He described the moment they realized payments were being missed and notices ignored. When asked who had been communicating with the bank, his answer was simple. "Miss Carter," he said. "Lauren Carter." "Not my parents." "Not me." Her name echoed in the room. Lauren's jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. Then my mother was called. She stood slowly, her hands shaking as she raised them to swear the oath. Her voice was barely above a whisper at first, but it grew steadier as she spoke. She explained her illness, the fatigue, the trust she had placed in her daughter, the fear of saying no. "I thought I was helping her build a life," she said. "I didn't realize I was risking my own." When she stepped down, she didn't look at Lauren. She walked straight back to her seat and took my father's hand. My father testified next. His voice cracked when he admitted he hadn't read the documents carefully, that he had felt proud of Lauren's ambition, that he hadn't wanted to believe she would ever put them in danger. "I should have protected my family better," he said. That sentence hung in the air. Lauren was called to the stand last. She stood with confidence, but I could see the strain now, the tiny cracks in the mask. She denied intent, denied malice, framed her actions as optimism gone wrong. She spoke about pressure, about expectations, about feeling overshadowed. When her attorney asked about me, she hesitated just a fraction too long. "She was always critical," Lauren said, "always watching, always ready to judge." I felt the room shift. The prosecutor stood. "Ms. Carter," he said, calm and precise, "did your sister ever benefit financially from your business?" Lauren swallowed. "No." "Did she receive any investor funds?" "No." "Did she sign any loan documents?" "No." He paused. "Then why did you tell multiple people she was responsible?" Lauren's mouth opened, closed. "I was under stress," she said finally. "Stress doesn't sign papers. Stress doesn't move money." The prosecutor sat down. The judge called a recess. Outside, reporters waited. I didn't stop. I didn't answer. I walked past them into the cold air, breathing deeply until my hands steadied. My mother joined me, wrapping her coat tighter around herself. "I don't recognize her," she said quietly. I nodded. "Neither do I." When we returned, the judge delivered his decision on the preliminary matters. The evidence would stand. The case would proceed to sentencing considerations if found guilty. Lauren stared straight ahead, her face pale now. The illusion was gone. That night I lay awake replaying the day. Not the testimony, not the accusations. The moment my mother spoke. The moment my father admitted regret. The truth had cost them something too. In the morning, Margaret called. "The judge is leaning toward a conviction," she said, strongly. I closed my eyes, and the house. "Protected," she replied. "It will not be taken." Relief washed over me, heavy and unexpected. Not triumph, relief. The trial resumed for closing arguments. Lauren's attorney spoke about ambition, about mistakes, about a young woman overwhelmed by pressure. The prosecutor spoke about responsibility, about choices, about harm. When it ended, the judge asked everyone to stand. His voice was steady. "Ms. Carter," he said, looking directly at Lauren, "the court finds you guilty." The word landed softly. "Guilty." Lauren's shoulders sagged. For the first time, she looked small. Sentencing would follow in the coming weeks. As we left the courtroom, Lauren didn't look at me. But I looked at her, not with anger, with acceptance. Because this wasn't my victory. It was the end of a lie. The weeks between the verdict and the sentencing were the strangest of my life. Everything had technically slowed down. No daily hearings, no frantic phone calls from attorneys, no reporters hovering outside the courthouse. On the surface, it looked like the storm had passed, but inside nothing was settled. Lauren moved out of her apartment and into a rented room on the edge of town. Her accounts were frozen. Her business name was officially dissolved. People who once praised her ambition now crossed the street to avoid her. My parents stayed inside most days. The house felt heavier every time I visited, as if it were absorbing the weight of everything that had been said out loud at last. One afternoon, my mother asked me to help her clean out the study. It was the room where my father had once kept his papers. The room I used to sit in as a teenager, filling out college applications while my parents argued softly in the kitchen. We opened drawers neither of us had touched in years. Old receipts, warranty manuals, stacks of unopened mail, and then at the back of the lowest drawer, a small envelope. My name was written on it in my grandmother's handwriting. My mother stared at it for a long moment before handing it to me. I've never seen this before. Inside was a single letter, yellowed at the edges, dated years earlier. In it, my grandmother wrote plainly the way she always had. She said she had noticed how much responsibility I carried, how I stepped in quietly when things fell apart, how she worried that one day my generosity would be mistaken for obligation. She had wanted to leave something directly to me, not because she loved me more, but because she wanted me protected. The letter ended with one sentence that made my chest tighten. "Do not let them spend your life for you." My mother covered her mouth with her hand. She tried to tell us, she whispered. "Yes," I said, "she did." That night I went home and sat alone with the letter spread out on my kitchen table. For the first time since this began, I let myself cry, not from anger, from grief, for the years I had given without being seen. The sentencing hearing came faster than I expected. The courtroom was quieter this time. No reporters, no spectators, just the people who mattered. Lauren stood when this judge addressed her. She looked thinner, older. Her confidence had drained away, leaving something raw behind. The judge spoke about responsibility, about trust, about the ripple effects of financial deception. Lauren was sentenced to several years of supervised probation restitution to investors and mandatory financial ethics counseling. No prison, but no escape. She would be paying for this for a long time. When it was over, she turned toward my parents. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was flat, tired. "I never thought it would end like this." My mother nodded slowly. Neither did we. Lauren looked at me then. For a moment I thought she might apologize. She didn't. She simply said, "You always did things the hard way." I met her eyes. "I did them the honest way." She looked away. Outside the courthouse, my father took a deep breath as if he'd been holding it for years. "We have to start over," he said. "Yes," I replied. "You do." They looked at me uncertain. "And you?" my mother asked. I paused. For the first time, the answer didn't scare me. "I already have," I said. In the weeks that followed, I made changes I had been postponing for a decade. I accepted a new position at work, one that required travel, one I would have turned down before. I stopped checking my phone every hour. I started saying no without explanation. The house was refinanced under stricter terms. My parents downsized their expenses. They learned slowly and painfully to live within reality instead of hope. Lauren faded from my daily thoughts, not because I forgave her, but because she no longer occupied the center of my life. One evening, my mother asked me something unexpected. "Do you think she hates you?" she asked. I thought about it. "No," I said. "I think she hates that I stopped sacrificing myself." That realization felt like freedom. I framed my grandmother's letter and hung it on the wall where I could see it every morning. "Do not let them spend your life for you." The words no longer felt like a warning. They felt like a promise. The first holiday after the sentencing arrived quietly. No announcements, no family group texts, no elaborate plans. Just Thanksgiving. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel obligated to go home. That realization alone told me how much had changed. My parents invited me anyway, carefully, without expectation woven into the invitation. "If you want to," my mother said on the phone. "We understand if you don't." That sentence mattered more than she knew. I went, not because I felt guilty, because I wanted to see who we were now. The house looked the same from the outside, same porch, same faded paint near the steps. But inside it felt stripped down, fewer decorations, fewer things pretending to be permanent. My mother had cooked a small meal, just the three of us. Lauren wasn't invited. We sat at the table in an unfamiliar quiet, not tense, just honest. Halfway through dinner, my father cleared his throat. "I want to say something," he said. My mother stilled. I waited. "I spent most of my life thinking being a good parent meant protecting my children from consequences," he said. "I was wrong." His voice shook. "I protected one child by sacrificing the other." The words landed gently, but they carried weight. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not just for the house. For all the years I assumed you'd carry what I didn't want to face." I nodded. "Thank you for saying that." My mother reached for my hand. "We don't expect you to fix us anymore." I smiled softly. "Good, because I won't." That wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. After dinner, I walked through the house alone. Past the hallway where our heights were marked on the wall. Past the study where the envelope from my grandmother had been hidden. I realized something then. This house didn't hold my future. It held my past. And that was enough. In December, Lauren sent me a letter. Handwritten. No return address. She didn't apologize. Not really. She wrote about counseling. About humiliation. About learning what accountability meant when no one rescues you. At the end, she wrote one sentence. "I don't know who I am without people cleaning up after me." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Not to treasure. Not to forget. Just to acknowledge. At work, my new role took me out of town more often. Hotels, early flights, quiet evenings alone in unfamiliar places. I liked it. There is a particular peace that comes from choosing yourself without apology. One evening in a hotel room far from home, I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked lighter, not because life was easier, because she wasn't carrying what never belonged to her. I called my mother that night. "I won't be around much this winter," I said. She hesitated, then said, "We'll be okay." I believed her. That was new too. The final change came quietly. I removed my parents' emergency expenses from my budget spreadsheet, not out of bitterness, out of trust. Trust that they would manage their own lives, trust that I was allowed to manage mine. As the year ended, I thought about everything that had brought me here. The kitchen conversation, the loan agreement, the moment I stopped saying okay. Revenge had never been my goal. Justice had. And justice, I learned, doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like growth. And sometimes it looks like finally choosing not to disappear. By the time spring arrived, the story everyone else remembered no longer felt like the one I was living. To most people in town, what happened to my family had become a cautionary tale. A sister who went too far, parents who trusted the wrong child, a house almost lost. But to me, the real story was quieter. It lived in the mornings when I woke up without dread tightening my chest. In the evenings when my phone stayed silent and I didn't rush to fill the gap with guilt. In the small, steady realization that I finally belonged to myself. I hadn't noticed how much of my identity was built around being needed until no one needed me anymore. At first, that emptiness was terrifying. Then it became space. I used that space to do things I had postponed for years. I took a short course I'd always been interested in. I started running again slowly, badly, but consistently. I cooked meals that no one else liked just because I did. And somewhere in the middle of all that ordinary living, something unexpected happened. I stopped replaying the past. Not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer defined me. My parents called once a week now, sometimes less. The conversations were different. They talked about practical things, appointments, repairs, weather. They no longer asked what they should do. They told me what they had decided. That shift mattered more than any apology. One afternoon, my mother said something that stayed with me. "We're learning how much we used you as a shield," she admitted, "from fear, from failure, from ourselves." I didn't respond right away. "I don't want to be your shield anymore," I said gently, "but I can still be your daughter." She understood. I could hear it in her silence. Lauren wrote again near the end of March, shorter this time. She said counseling was hard, that sitting with consequences felt unbearable some days, that for the first time, no one was stepping in to soften the fall. She didn't ask for help, that more than anything told me she was changing, or at least beginning to. I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty. Out of respect for the boundary we both needed. Forgiveness, I learned, is not the same as access. As Easter approached, my parents asked if I wanted to join them. I declined, not because I was angry, because I had plans. That still felt radical. I spent the weekend hiking with friends, laughing around a fire, talking about nothing that carried emotional weight. For the first time, my life wasn't a reaction to someone else's choices. It was my own. On the drive home, I thought about my grandmother, about the letter she'd hidden away, about how clearly she had seen what no one else wanted to acknowledge. Some people mistake endurance for strength, but true strength, I finally understood, is knowing when to stop enduring. The final legal matters wrapped up quietly. Restitution plans were approved. The house was formally removed from any outstanding claims. My parents signed updated wills, fair ones. They showed me the documents without me asking. That mattered too. One evening, my father called me outside of our usual schedule. "I just wanted to say something," he said. I waited. "I'm proud of you," he said. "Not because you saved us, but because you refused to disappear." I closed my eyes. That sentence healed something I hadn't known was still bleeding. After we hung up, I sat alone on my balcony watching the city lights flicker on one by one. I thought about the woman I had been when this began. Tired, invisible, afraid to say no. And I thought about the woman I was now. Still kind, still loyal, but no longer willing to be consumed. The difference between those two women wasn't revenge. It was self-respect. And that I learned is the quietest form of power. The day I realized I had truly moved on wasn't dramatic. There was no confrontation, no apology, no moment where everything clicked into place with cinematic certainty. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was standing in my kitchen, sunlight cutting across the counter, coffee brewing in the background. My phone buzzed with a missed call from my mother, and for the first time my heart didn't jump. Not with fear, not with obligation, not with the reflex to fix whatever might be broken. I finished pouring my coffee before calling her back. She answered immediately. "Nothing's wrong," she said quickly, almost nervously. "I just wanted to tell you your father fixed the back steps. And I'm proud of him." I smiled. "That's good, Mom." That was it. No crisis, no hidden request, no emotional debt disguised as conversation. After we hung up, I stood there for a moment, letting it sink in. This was what balance felt like. Not distance, not punishment, just healthy space. Lauren was still completing her restitution, still attending counseling, still learning what life looked like without shortcuts. We didn't speak, and that was okay. Some relationships aren't meant to be repaired back into what they were. They're meant to transform into something smaller, safer, or sometimes silent. Silence, I learned, can be merciful. My parents continued rebuilding their lives slowly, carefully. They no longer planned around Lauren's dreams or leaned on my stability. They planned around reality. That was their work now. Mine was different. I started mentoring younger women at work once who reminded me of myself years ago. Capable, reliable, quietly overextended. When one of them apologized for saying no to a project, I stopped her. "Don't apologize for protecting your energy," I told her. "It's not selfish, it's necessary." The words surprised me with how easily they came. One evening, while cleaning out an old box, I found a photo from years earlier. All four of us standing in front of the house, arms around each other, smiling for the camera. I studied it for a long time, not with bitterness, with understanding. That photo wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. We had loved each other, and we had hurt each other. Both things could exist at once. I slipped the photo back into the box and closed the lid. Some memories don't need to be displayed to be honored. As spring turned into summer, my life expanded in ways I hadn't anticipated. New friendships, new routines, new ambitions that didn't require anyone else's approval. I traveled more, I laughed louder, I slept better. And slowly something profound settled into my bones. I was no longer waiting for permission to live. If you're listening to this and parts of my story feel uncomfortably familiar, I want you to hear this clearly. Loyalty does not require self-erasure. Love does not demand silence. Family is not a free pass to exploit your generosity. Standing up for yourself does not make you cruel. It makes you whole. I didn't destroy my family. I stopped disappearing for it. And in doing so, I gave everyone the chance to face who they really were. Some rose to that truth. Some struggled with it, but all of us were changed by it. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the dependable one, the fixer, the one who carried what others refused to hold, you're not alone. Share your thoughts, tell your story, and if you want more real-life stories about justice, boundaries, and reclaiming your dignity, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Because sometimes hearing someone else say enough is exactly what gives us permission to say it ourselves. And that is where real freedom begins.